In the realm of the kami, where heaven met the sea and light clashed with storm, two divine siblings shaped the fate of the world. Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess, whose brilliance gave life to heaven and earth. Susanoo, the stormbringer, fierce and untamed, whose tempests could shake the very pillars of creation. Bound by blood, yet divided by pride. Their clash was not only a battle of gods, but a war between order and chaos, light and shadow. From the destruction of heaven's peace to the trembling of the earth below, their struggle would test the bonds of family, the strength of the cosmos, and the destiny of all creation. This is the full epic story of Amaterasu and Susanoo, Sun and the Storm. Amaterasu versus Susanoo, the epic battle of sun and storm. Chapter 1. The birth of the kami in the dawn before time itself. When the heavens and the earth were still formless, there arose the primordial deities who shaped the islands of Japan. Among them were Izanagi and Izanami, the divine couple entrusted with creation. Together, they stirred the cosmic seas with the jeweled spear of heaven, and from its dripping brine emerged the first land, Onagoro, the foundation upon which life would blossom. Yet creation was not without tragedy. Izanami, the mother of countless kami, perished in the fires of childbirth, as she gave life to Kogutsuchi, the god of flames. Grief-stricken Izanagi descended into Yomi, the land of the dead, to retrieve his beloved. What he found was a realm of corruption and shadow, where Izanami had become bound to decay. Horrified by her monstrous form, he fled, sealing the entrance with a massive boulder, and forever sundering the realms of life and death. Polluted by his journey into Yomi, Izanagi knew he must cleanse himself. He journeyed to a river and performed the first ritual of purification, Mizagi. As he bathed, new deities were born from his very body. From the filth he washed away came the gods of impurity and misfortune. But from his cleansing came three radiant deities who would shape the destiny of heaven and earth. From his left eye emerged Amaterasu Kami, the radiant sun goddess, blazing with the light of dawn. She was beautiful beyond compare, her hair flowing like golden rays, her presence bringing warmth and clarity to the world. Izanagi rejoiced, proclaiming her the ruler of Takamagahara, the high plane of heaven. From his right eye came Tsukuyomi no Makoto, the god of the moon, serene and silent. His silver glow balanced Amaterasu's brilliance, illuminating the night and guiding the tides. To him, Izanagi entrusted dominion over the realm of twilight, and from his nose, with a mighty exhale, was born Susanoo no Makoto, the storm god. Wild and fierce, his cry shook the heavens, and his tears became rivers that flooded the land. Though his power was immense, his nature was restless and turbulent, like the crashing waves of the sea. To him, Izanagi granted rule over the oceans, the untamed waters that roared beneath the sky. Thus the three siblings were born, the sun, the moon, and the storm. They were destined to govern the cycles of nature, to maintain balance in the world Izanagi had shaped. Yet even from their first breaths, the harmony between them trembled on fragile ground. Amaterasu shone with order and brilliance, Tsukuyomi reflected calm neutrality, and Susanoo burned with uncontrollable fury. Izanagi, weary from his labors, looked upon his children with both pride and foreboding. He bestowed upon each their realm, and withdrew from the world of men, leaving it in the care of the kami. But in the depths of Susanoo's heart stirred a storm of defiance. He despised the task given to him, rejecting the rule of the seas. his gaze lifted not to the waters below, but to the heavens above, where his sister's light shone endlessly. A seed of envy and rebellion took root within him, one that would grow until it threatened the very order of heaven itself. For now, though, the world rejoiced. The sun rose and fell with Amaterasu's grace. The moon drifted serenely with Tsukuyomi's guidance, and the seas surged with Susanoo's storms. The kami bowed to their new sovereigns, and mankind looked upward with awe at the brilliant dance of light and shadow across the sky. The age of the children of Izanagi had begun, and with it, a tale of glory and discord that would echo through the ages. Chapter 2. The realms divided. The birth of the three siblings brought light, balance, and storm into the world, but it also sowed the seeds of conflict. When Izanagi departed to dwell in seclusion, leaving the realms to his children, the heavens trembled under the weight of destiny. Amaterasu, radiant and orderly, ascended to Takamagahara, the high plane of heaven. Her golden light stretched across the vast skies, and her brilliance became the rhythm of days. She was a goddess of discipline, harmony, and leadership, and the kami rallied to her banner, seeing in her the true sovereign of heaven. Tsukuyomi descended to the realm of the night. His silver glow spread gently across the earth, reflecting the sun's glory with tranquil grace. Though he bore equal divinity, his presence was distant, silent, and contemplative. He neither sought dominion nor challenged authority, choosing instead to dwell in solitude, a guardian of balance rather than ambition. And Susanoo, fierce stormborn, was cast into the realm of the seas. The waves rose with his laughter, and the winds howled with his cries. But though his strength was great, he loathed his burden. He despised the endless waters, raging against them as though they were chains binding his spirit. His heart yearned not for the oceans, but for the skies above, where his sister ruled in glory. From the moment of division, harmony was fragile. Amaterasu ruled with benevolence, ensuring order among the kami, guiding mortals with light, crops, and warmth. Her presence inspired faith and reverence, for without her radiance, the earth would sink into shadow. But Susanoo's storms battered the land, sometimes giving water to fields, sometimes destroying them in fury. His tempestuous nature frightened both gods and mortals alike. He was unpredictable, one day a benefactor, the next a destroyer. His followers were few, and even they feared the wrath that came as quickly as the sea wind. Tsukuyomi alone seemed at peace, yet even he could not remain untouched by discord. A quarrel arose between him and Amaterasu when he slew Yukimochi, the goddess of food, after she offended him with her strange way of providing sustenance. In fury and grief, Amaterasu turned her face away from him, and from that day, brother and sister were forever separated. The sun and moon no longer shared the same sky, and the world knew the cycle of day and night. This separation shook the heavens. If the sun and moon themselves could not live in harmony, what hope was there for Susanoo, whose rage grew with each passing season? The gods whispered of his defiance, of the way he neglected the seas, letting chaos stir in the waves. Mortals cursed his storms, and Amaterasu's patience thinned. Yet, despite his scorn for the sea, Susanoo's power could not be denied. His storms lashed against the shores, his thunder roared in the heavens, and his tears flooded rivers. He was a god of both creation and destruction, a force that could never be fully contained. Amaterasu, though sovereign, knew her brother was dangerous. His defiance would not simply fade. The rift widened when Susanoo, consumed by grief for his mother Izanami, declared he would leave his post. He would abandon the seas entirely, returning to Yomi to be with the mother he had never known. The kami recoiled at this oath, for to tread the path of the dead was forbidden. Worse still, his refusal to rule his domain meant chaos for mortals who depended on the balance of sea and sky. Amaterasu summoned Susanoo before her in Takamagahara. The siblings met in the radiant halls of heaven, golden clouds parting beneath their feet. She stood tall, blazing with authority, demanding that he explain himself. Susanoo raged, his voice like rolling thunder, his eyes wild with defiance. He cried out that he would no longer bear the chains of his father's command, nor bow to the order of the heavens. The air trembled with their quarrel. Amaterasu's brilliance flared like the noonday sun, while Susanoo's fury howled like a typhoon. It was no mere argument between brother and sister, but the clash of forces that governed the world itself. The other kami, watching from afar, feared the heavens would shatter. Tsukuyomi remained silent, distant in his moonlit realm. His neutrality was his curse, for he neither defended nor condemned, and the rift widened without his voice. The balance of three had fractured, leaving only two forces locked in rising tension: the light of Amaterasu and the storm of Susanoo. Thus the realms were divided, and the seeds of rebellion planted. Amaterasu ruled with order, Tsukuyomi with distance, and Susanoo with fury. But it was not enough for Susanoo merely to abandon his throne. His rage demanded more. He would prove his power, no matter the cost. And so the storm gathered. Chapter 3. The Storm God's Rebellion. The high plane of heaven had long been a place of radiance, where the kami gathered beneath the golden brilliance of Amaterasu. Order ruled, harmony prevailed, and the balance between heaven and earth endured. But when Susanoo declared his defiance, the heavens trembled. He would not remain chained to the seas, nor submit to the authority of his radiant sister. His heart burned with grief for the mother he had never known, Izanami, and with rage against the order imposed by his father, Izanagi. In his fury, Susanoo cried that he would descend into Yomi, the land of the dead, to be with his mother. The kami gasped at this vow, for none could walk into the realm of darkness without consequence. Yet his words were more than grief, they were rebellion. Amaterasu summoned him once more before her throne of golden light. She spoke with calm authority, urging him to release his fury, to accept his burden, and to protect the seas, as was his duty. But Susanoo's heart was a storm. He would not bow. Instead, he challenged her authority, his eyes blazing like lightning. "I am no servant of heaven," he thundered, "nor will I bend to your will. If the sun claims dominion over the skies, then let the storm rise and test its strength." The heavens shook with his words. The winds screamed, thunder rolled, and black clouds gathered over Takamagahara. The kami trembled, for never before had such defiance echoed in the high plain. Susanoo descended in wrath. His storms tore through the seas he was meant to guard, raising waves that swallowed villages and winds that snapped ancient forests. Mortals cried out in terror, cursing the name of the storm god, praying to Amaterasu for salvation. But Susanoo's rage was not satisfied with the seas. He ascended once more to Takamagahara, determined to prove his strength. He stormed into his sister's realm, his feet shaking the heavenly plains, his fury unbound. The kami scattered as he approached, for his eyes were wild, and his laughter filled the skies. He tore through the sacred rice fields, the bounty that Amaterasu had given to mortals. He flung aside the walls of heavenly halls, defiling the sacred places of worship. His rampage grew ever more violent, his defiance echoing like thunder. Amaterasu, still radiant, confronted him. She stood in the center of Takamagahara, her brilliance blazing, her command unwavering. "Susanoo," she called, her voice clear as the midday sun. "Your storm consumes all, but storms must pass. You dishonor the heavens, you dishonor our Father, and you dishonor yourself." But her words did not calm him. Susanoo laughed, a sound like crashing waves, and he unleashed his fury, not in words, but in action. In his madness, he seized a sacred horse from the heavens, flayed its skin, and hurled the carcass into Amaterasu's weaving hall, where her maidens crafted garments of light. The sacred hall split asunder. The maidens cried out in horror, their lives ended by the violence of the storm god. The heavens shook with grief and outrage. It was then that Amaterasu's heart broke. She, who had endured her brother's wrath with patience, could bear no more. Her light dimmed, and sorrow overwhelmed her. Turning away from the heavens, she fled into the cave of heaven, sealing herself away in darkness. The world shuddered. With the sun goddess hidden, light vanished from the sky. Darkness fell upon the earth, and chaos reigned. Crops withered, rivers turned cold, and mortals lived in fear. The kami wept, for without Amaterasu order collapsed. All this was the work of Susanoo, storm unbound, the rebellion unleashed. His defiance had not merely scarred the heavens, it had plunged the entire world into shadow. But even as the earth mourned, Susanoo's fury raged on. He believed his rebellion had proven his power, yet his heart was unfulfilled. For though he had shaken the heavens, his sister's light was gone, and the balance of the world was broken. The storm had triumphed, but at the cost of harmony. The kami gathered in despair. Could the sun be restored? Could Amaterasu's light ever shine again? Or had the rebellion of Susanoo doomed heaven and earth alike? Thus, the storm god's rebellion echoed through the ages, a moment when the heavens shook. The earth trembled, and light itself fled into darkness. Chapter 4. The Sun Goddess in hiding. When Amaterasu fled into the cave of heaven, sealing its entrance with an enormous stone, the brilliance of the world vanished. The sun no longer rose over the mountains, no longer warmed the seas, no longer nourished the fields of men. The earth shuddered beneath the weight of her absence, and the high plain of heaven was plunged into despair. The kami looked upward, waiting for dawn, but found only endless night. The moon shone cold and pale, unable to replace the warmth of the sun. Crops withered in their fields, rivers slowed in their courses, and mortals stumbled in fear beneath a sky stripped of hope. In Takamagahara, the high plain itself grew dim. The halls that once glowed with Amaterasu's radiance were now draped in shadow. The sacred fires waned, the altars lay in silence, and the divine order trembled. The kami gathered, their faces grave, their voices heavy with sorrow. For without the light of the sun, the heavens and the earth alike would wither into ruin. All knew the cause, Susanoo, whose storm of wrath had driven the goddess to despair. Yet though many cursed his name, the storm god himself wandered, restless and bitter. His rage had won him no throne, only darkness. Even his own heart felt empty in the endless night he had brought. The council of the gods was summoned. From every corner of heaven they came, wise deities, fierce warriors, gentle guardians, all united in their grief. They spoke of Amaterasu's sorrow, of her retreat into the cave, and of the peril that lay before them. The elder gods declared that the world could not endure without her light. Yet no force of arms could break the stone at the cave's mouth, for it was sealed with her divine will. No threats could move her, for she had turned from all voices, and so they asked, how could the sun be coaxed forth from the darkness? It was Omeokane, the deity of wisdom and thought, who rose among them. His eyes gleamed with the quiet fire of insight. The goddess has hidden herself because her heart is heavy with grief. If we cannot command her, then we must draw her forth by cunning. Light cannot be forced, it must be invited to shine. The kami listened as Omeokane devised a plan. They would gather before the cave, and there they would not weep or rage, but celebrate. They would call forth laughter, joy, and music so loud that even in her sorrow, Amaterasu could not ignore it. They would show her that the world longed not for her fear, but for her light, her beauty, her presence. The gods agreed, and preparations began. The strongest among them, Aimnotajikara, stood ready at the entrance, his mighty arms prepared to seize the stone should the goddess emerge. The fleet-footed Aimnazum, goddess of mirth and dance, adorned herself in brilliant garments, bells at her feet, her spirit blazing with joy. The others brought drums, flutes, and sacred branches adorned with jewels, crafting a festival of light amidst the darkness. Soon, the night air filled with rhythm. Drums thundered, flutes sang, and laughter rang across the high plain. Amenasum leaped upon an upturned barrel, her dance wild and unrestrained. She stamped her feet, shook her bells, and cast aside her robes until the gods roared with laughter. Their mirth rose like a tide, echoing against the sealed cave. Within, Amaterasu stirred. Her sorrow was deep, her heart broken by Susanoo's cruelty, yet the sound of joy pierced the silence. She wondered, how could there be laughter in a world without light? Curiosity overcame her grief. Slowly, cautiously, she moved the stone and peered out with one radiant eye. At once, the heavens shone with her brilliance. The gods cried out in awe, for even that single glance banished shadows and filled their hearts with hope. In that moment, Aimnotajikaro leaped forward. With strength divine, he grasped the stone and flung it aside, tearing open the entrance. The gods rushed forward, guiding Amaterasu out, surrounding her with song and praise. They placed before her a mirror, polished until it gleamed like the surface of a still pond. Startled, Amaterasu gazed into it. For the first time, she beheld her own brilliance reflected back to her, a beauty she had not known, a radiance that filled even the darkest night. The gods cried out, "Behold, you are the light of heaven and earth, without whom the world cannot endure." Her sorrow lifted, though her heart still ached from her brother's cruelty. She saw now the love and reverence that bound the kami and mankind alike to her. She stepped forth, and with her return, the heavens blazed once more. Dawn rose, golden and fierce, scattering shadows from the world. The rivers sparkled, the fields blossomed, and mortals rejoiced beneath the returning sun. Thus, Amaterasu emerged from hiding, her light restored to the heavens. The storm of Susanoo's rebellion still lingered. The gods knew that order had been restored only for a time, and that the storm god himself would one day be called to account for his deeds. For now, however, the sun shone, and the world breathed once more. The laughter of the kami echoed in the high plain, and the people of earth lifted their eyes in gratitude to the goddess of the dawn. Chapter 5. The Judgment of Susanoo. The return of Amaterasu's light brought joy to both heaven and earth. But in the heart of Takamagahara, the gods knew that order had been broken. The laughter of their festival could not erase the blood spilled, the sacred halls desecrated, and the grief that had driven the Sun Goddess into exile. All eyes turned to Susanoo. The storm god wandered the high plain, his fury spent but his pride unbroken. He looked upon the restored brilliance of his sister and felt not shame but bitterness, for he saw the gods rejoice at her return while none sang for him. The storms he had unleashed still roared across the seas below, and mortals cursed his name. Yet Susanoo would not repent. He believed his rebellion had shown his strength, and in his heart burned the thought that the sun's glory had always been greater, only because others feared her light. But the high council of the kami could no longer allow his rampage to go unanswered. They gathered in the sacred court, their voices stern, their hearts heavy. Amaterasu herself sat at the head of the assembly, her brilliance calm but resolute, for though she loved her brother, she could not ignore the devastation he had caused. Omokane, the wise counselor, spoke first. Susanoo has defiled the holy places, slain maidens of heaven, and cast the world into darkness. His rebellion struck not only against Amaterasu, but against the balance of heaven and earth itself. If there is to be order, justice must be given. The other gods nodded in solemn agreement. Some demanded his banishment, others his destruction. Yet there were those who pitied the storm god, for they saw his sorrow for Izanami twisted into rage. And they remembered that he too was a child of Izanagi, born with purpose. Amaterasu rose, her golden hair flowing like dawn. Her voice carried not wrath, but truth. My brother's storms have scarred the heavens, and his fury nearly ended the world. Yet he is kami, as I am kami, as Tsukuyomi is kami. He must not be destroyed, for destruction cannot restore harmony, but neither can his rebellion go unpunished. Let him be judged, and let his fate be one that teaches him balance. The council agreed, and so Susanoo was summoned before them. He entered the hall defiant, his eyes still flashing like distant lightning, though his steps were heavy. Before the assembly he stood, surrounded by the glow of Amaterasu and the stern faces of the gods. Susanoo no Makoto, Omokane declared, you have broken the order of the heavens. You have cast aside your duty, spread chaos upon the seas, and driven the sun into hiding. How do you answer to these charges? Susanoo laughed bitterly. I answer with truth. I have done as storms do. I have raged. I have destroyed. I have reminded you that order is fragile. If you fear my strength, then perhaps your order was never strong. A murmur swept through the assembly. Some were angered, others saddened. Amaterasu met her brother's gaze, her eyes shining with sorrow. You are storm, yes, she said. But storm is not only destruction. Storm brings rain to the fields, wind to the sails, renewal to the land. You have chosen only ruin when you might have been a force of life. You dishonor not me, but yourself. For the first time, Susanoo faltered. His pride resisted her words, yet deep within he felt their truth. Still, he clenched his fists, unwilling to bow. The council rendered judgment. Susanoo would be stripped of his place in Takamagahara. He would be cast from the high plain and banished to wander the mortal realm. His storms would no longer be unchecked across the heavens, but bound to the seas and mountains of earth. He would live among mortals, not as their destroyer, but as one who must learn the weight of life. Susanoo roared in fury. Lightning split the skies, thunder rolled across the heavens, but the decree was unshaken. The gods stood together, their will united, and for all his power, the storm could not overcome their harmony. At last, Susanoo turned away. His pride smoldered, his heart still a tempest, yet within him lingered his sister's words. He was storm, but storm could also give. Thus Susanoo was cast from heaven. He descended like a whirlwind, his cries echoing across the land. His fate bound now not to rebellion in the high plain, but to trials and battles upon the earth. The gods watched his departure with heavy hearts. Amaterasu shone once more over the world, but in her light was sorrow for her brother. For though he was gone, his destiny was not ended. In the shadows of the mortal realm, the storm god's tale would continue, and one day, his fury would be turned not against his kin, but against a monster born of chaos itself. For beyond the seas, deep in the dark rivers of the land, there stirred a serpent so vast that even Susanoo's storms would tremble before it. The judgment of the storm god was not his end. It was the beginning of his greatest trial. Chapter 6. The Exile of Susanoo. The gates of Takamagahara closed behind Susanoo, and the high plain of heaven was silent once more. Where once his storms had shaken the golden halls, now only the steady light of Amaterasu remained. The gods stood united, but their hearts were heavy, for banishment was a wound that cut both ways, severing brother from sister, storm from sky. Susanoo, cast down from heaven, fell like a thunderbolt through the clouds. His descent split the skies, his cries echoing across the mountains and seas. Mortals who looked upward saw the heavens shatter with lightning and trembled. For they knew the storm god had come to walk the earth. He landed upon the rugged coasts of the mortal realm, the waves roaring in greeting, the winds bending to his will. Yet this was no throne of glory, no kingdom of conquest. It was exile. The high plain was lost to him, his sister's radiance denied, and only the endless horizon of the seas remained to bear his fury. For many days, Susanoo wandered in solitude. He walked the rocky shores, his footsteps shaking the earth. He climbed the mountains, but their peaks offered no solace. He waded into rivers, but their waters carried no comfort. Wherever he went, storms followed, and mortals fled in fear, cursing his name as they huddled in ruined villages. Yet even as he raged, Amaterasu's words echoed in his mind. You are storm, yes, but storm is not only destruction. The memory stung him more deeply than banishment. For though his pride denied it, part of him longed to prove her wrong, or perhaps prove her right. But how could a storm bring life? To Susanoo, his power had always been fury, his gift always terror. The seas did not thank the storm, they endured it. It was during these wanderings that Susanoo came upon the land of Izuma, where rolling rivers met fertile plains. But what should have been a place of bounty was filled with grief. He found a family-an old man, his wife, and their weeping daughter standing at the banks of a river, their faces pale with despair. The storm god, curious, approached. His presence made the skies darken and the winds howl, yet the family did not flee. Their sorrow was greater than their fear. Why do you weep? Susanoo demanded, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. The old man, trembling but resolute, bowed low. Great Kami, we are cursed. Each year, the serpent Yamatonorochi, with 8 heads and 8 tails, comes forth from the river to claim one of our daughters as sacrifice. 7 we have lost, and now only this one remains. Soon the beast will come again, and we are powerless to stop it. Susanoo's eyes narrowed. In their tale, he felt the stirrings of destiny. Here was not rebellion against the heavens, nor defiance against his sister's light. Here was chaos itself, a monster that devoured life without reason, a beast that knew no balance. For the first time, the storm god felt a purpose greater than rage. "Fear not," he declared, his voice crackling with thunder. "I am Susanoo, master of storm and sea. No serpent shall claim your daughter while I walk this land. I will face this Orochi, and I will cast it down." The family stared in awe, their sorrow pierced by hope. The daughter, trembling, bowed deeply, though tears still shone in her eyes. Thus Susanoo's exile became the path to his greatest trial. No longer would he storm against heaven's order, he would unleash his fury against a monster of chaos. Yet even as he made his vow, he knew this would be no simple battle. For the serpent Yamatonorochi was said to stretch across mountains, its body vast as rivers, its eyes burning with fire, its hunger endless. To face it would require not only strength, but cunning. And so, for the first time, the storm god began to think not only of destruction, but of creation, of crafting a plan, of turning his storms into a weapon of balance, not rebellion. His exile had stripped him of his place in heaven, but it had also given him a chance, the chance to prove that even a storm could be more than ruin. In the distance, thunder rolled. Susanoo lifted his gaze to the darkening horizon and whispered to himself, "This time, my fury shall not be wasted. This time, it will serve." Chapter 7. The Tale of the Serpent Yamatonorochi. The land of Izuma trembled under the shadow of fear, for every soul knew the name of the beast, Yamatonorochi. It was not merely a serpent, but a horror born of chaos itself, an abomination with 8 colossal heads and 8 thrashing tails. Its body so vast, it stretched across mountains, coiling like rivers of flesh. Its scales were black as night and red as blood, each one sharp as iron, clattering like shields in a storm. From its many mouths dripped venom that poisoned rivers and fields alike, with tongues forked like blades and eyes that blazed like suns. When Orochi slithered, the earth shook. When it roared, the skies cracked with thunder. The people of Izuma whispered that the serpent had crawled out of the primordial seas, a remnant of ancient chaos that the gods themselves had never subdued. It was hunger made flesh, destruction without reason, and for many generations it had demanded tribute, one daughter from the royal house each year. And so 7 had been taken, their names etched in sorrow, their screams lost to the river. Only the last remained, and with her life, the line of her family would end. Susanoo listened as the old man Ashinazuchi and his wife Tenazuchi recounted the tale. Their voices quavered, heavy with grief, yet their eyes held a fragile spark of hope, now that the storm god had vowed to protect them. Each year, Ashinazuchi said, "We led a daughter to the banks of the high river, and there the monster came, its 8 heads rising like mountains, its body blotting out the sky. None who stood against it lived. Our weapons shattered, our warriors were torn asunder. Only tears and silence remained." Susanoo's fists clenched, the storm inside him surging. "And no god came to aid you?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The heavens had turned their gaze elsewhere, leaving mortals to suffer under the weight of chaos. No, Tenazuchi whispered, only silence from the heavens. We are but dust before the gods. The words stung. Once Susanoo himself had been among those gods who turned away, who raged for pride, while mortals perished below. But now, exiled from Takamagahara, he stood upon the same soil as these frail beings. Their fate was tied to his own, and in their fear he saw reflected the chaos within himself. Then I shall stand where no god has stood before, Susanoo declared, his voice rolling like thunder. I will face this beast, not as heaven's son, but as storm incarnate. Its heads shall fall, and its tails shall be broken. No daughter shall weep again. The family bowed low, tears streaming down their faces. Their daughter, Kushinadaheim, though trembling, lifted her gaze to meet Susanoo's. In her eyes, he saw both terror and courage, the fragile strength of mortals who endure storms with no weapons but hope. That night, Susanoo sat by the river, gazing into its dark waters. The moon hung low, silver upon the waves, and the storm god pondered the task before him. To meet Orochi with brute strength alone would be folly, for even he, with his tempestuous might, could not match the monster's endless heads and tails. To fight chaos, he would need more than rage, he would need cunning. Thus, a plan began to take root, as wild and fierce as the storms he commanded. When dawn came, he spoke to Ashinazuchi, "Brew me sake, strong and plentiful, not for men, but for a beast. 8 vats you must prepare, vast enough to drown a stag. Their fragrance shall be a lure, their strength a trap." The old man's eyes widened. Sake, to fell a serpent. "A storm may shatter stone," Susanoo replied, "but it may also turn the tide. Trust in me, and in the fury I wield." And so Ashinazuchi obeyed. He and his household labored day and night, brewing the strongest rice wine Izuma had ever known, filling 8 colossal vats until the air itself was heavy with its intoxicating aroma. Susanoo oversaw the work, his hands shaping the plan as he once shaped storms, weaving destruction into cunning design. At last, the day of sacrifice came. The river churned black, the skies turned crimson, and the ground quaked beneath the approach of Yamatonorochi. From the distance came the hiss of scales scraping earth, the thunder of its vast coils. And then 8 heads rose above the trees, eyes like burning suns, mouths dripping venom that sizzled upon the ground. Mortals fled, shrieking prayers to any god who might hear. But Susanoo stood firm, a lone figure upon the riverbank, the storm at his back. Before him, the 8 vats gleamed, filled with the intoxicating sake. The beast halted, its heads swaying, tasting the air. The scent of wine struck its nostrils, and its eyes blazed with hunger. With a roar that split the heavens, Yamato no Orochi lunged forward, each head plunging into a vat. The monster drank greedily, its tongues lapping, its coils thrashing in drunken delight. Susanoo's lips curled into a grim smile. The trap was sprung. Yet, as he watched the serpent drink, he felt no joy, only a heavy silence within. This was not a storm of pride, nor rebellion, it was judgment upon chaos itself. His exile had brought him here, to this moment, where his fury might finally serve more than destruction. When Orochi's thrashing slowed, when its heads wavered, heavy with drunken stupor, Susanoo rose to his full height, his eyes blazing like lightning. He drew forth his great sword, and the storm god whispered to the winds, "Now begins the reckoning." Chapter 8. The Battle with Orochi. The air was thick with the stench of sake, and venom. The riverbank groaned under the weight of Yamatano Orochi's coils, its body stretching for miles, scales glistening black and crimson under the dim light of dawn. 8 massive heads lolled drunkenly above, each tongue flickering lazily, drooling poison into the earth. The monster swayed, stupefied by the vats of rice wine, yet, even in its drunken haze, its sheer presence was unbearable. Storm of flesh and chaos. Trees bent beneath its movements. The ground cracked beneath its coils. Mortals had long since fled, leaving only silence, broken by the guttural growls of the beast. And standing before it, blade in hand, was Susanoo. The storm god's hair whipped in the rising wind, his eyes alight with thunder. This was no drunken feast to him. This was the moment of reckoning, the clash between chaos and order, between the beast of old and the fury of storms reborn. Yamatano Orochi, he called, his voice booming across the valley. Your reign of terror ends here. No longer shall daughters be torn from their homes. No longer shall your hunger devour the land. Tonight, the storm claims your head. The serpent stirred, 8 heads rising sluggishly, venom dripping in streams that hissed into the river. 1 head hissed, another growled, a third let out a roar that rattled the mountains. Even drunk Orochi was a nightmare beyond imagining. But Susanoo did not flinch. With a cry like a bolt of lightning tearing the heavens, he charged. His blade gleamed silver white, an extension of the storm itself. The first head lunged, venom sprayed, sizzling holes into the ground. Susanoo rolled aside, his sword flashing upward in a brilliant arc. Steel met scale. The head toppled, spraying black ichor like a flood. The river boiled where the blood fell, and the serpent shrieked in fury, 7 voices howling at once. Another head struck, its fangs snapping like thunderclaps. Susanoo met it head-on, his sword plunging deep into the maw. The skull split in 2, the head falling lifeless at his feet. 6 remained. The beast thrashed wildly, drunk but enraged, its tails whipping like crashing waves. 1 struck the ground where Susanoo had stood, shattering rock and soil in an explosion of dust. He leaped high, landing upon the beast's back, racing along its scaly length as lightning danced at his heels. A third head reared, snapping at him. He leaped, twisting midair, his sword slicing clean through its neck. The cut was so swift, the head fell without a sound. The storm raged louder. Thunder rolled above. The heavens themselves seemed to watch, but the beast was not yet beaten. The 4th head lunged from the left, the 5th from the right, both striking with venomous fury. Susanoo slid between them, sparks flying as he dragged his blade across both necks in a single, sweeping strike. 2 heads fell as one, their screams drowned by the storm's roar. The serpent bellowed, blood cascading into the river like black waterfalls. Its drunkenness turned to desperation. Its remaining 3 heads weaved and hissed, fangs snapping, eyes burning with hatred. Susanoo's chest heaved, his arms ached, but his spirit blazed brighter than ever. This is the price of terror, he roared, stormlight crackling across his blade. This is the storm's judgment. Another head came down, mouth wide enough to swallow him whole. With a furious cry, Susanoo drove his sword straight upward, piercing through palate and skull. The head convulsed, then collapsed, the earth shaking beneath its fall. 2 heads remained. The ground was slick with ichor. The river frothed black. Orochi's coils lashed wildly, tearing trees from their roots, crushing boulders like clay. Susanoo staggered as one tail slammed into him, sending him sprawling across the ground. His sword flew from his grasp, clattering into the mud. For a moment, silence. The two remaining heads hissed, closing in, their breath rank with poison. Susanoo pushed himself up, blood trickling from his mouth, his vision swimming. His blade lay yards away, glimmering faintly in the stormlight. The serpent lunged. With a roar, Susanoo dove, rolling through mud and venom, his hand clasping the sword once more. Lightning surged through him, into the steel, into the very storm above. He rose as the two heads struck together. With a mighty cry, he swung. The blade blazed like the heart of the tempest. Both heads fell. Silence thundered across the land. The body of Yamatenorichi convulsed, its 8 tails writhing, then falling limp one by one. Its vast form shuddered, then collapsed into the river with a crash that sent waves rolling across Izuma. Black ichor poured into the waters, steaming, hissing, before slowly dispersing. The beast was dead. Susanoo stood, chest heaving, drenched in sweat and blood, his blade blackened with venom and ichor. He gazed upon the slain serpent, feeling the storm within him calm, just slightly, for the first time in memory. But even in death, Orochi had one last secret to yield. As Susanoo wiped the blade, his eyes caught upon the remains of one neck's scales, glinting strangely. Curiosity stirred. He pried open the serpent's flesh, and there, within the body of chaos itself, he found something shining, a sword, unlike any other, radiant and divine. This was Kusanagi no Tsurugi, the grass-cutting sword, a gift hidden in the belly of chaos, awaiting the storm god's hand. Susanoo lifted it high, lightning flashing across the heavens, and in that moment, the exile, the storm, the destroyer, became more than fury. He became destiny. Chapter 9. The Sword of Destiny. The valley lay silent in the wake of battle. The corpse of Yamatenorichi stretched across the river, a mountain of flesh and shadow. The storm began to fade, its thunder echoing into distance, leaving behind only the hiss of steam rising from poisoned waters. And there, in the stillness, Susanoo held aloft the prize born from chaos itself, the Sword of Destiny. It shimmered, its blade unlike any forged by mortal or kami. Where the storm's lightning struck, the sword caught the light and seemed to hold it, bending it into a glow that pulsed with life. Its hilt bore patterns like the endless waves. Its edge glistened, sharper than the bite of a tempest. It was no ordinary weapon. It was as though the heavens themselves had hidden their power in the belly of the serpent, waiting for the one worthy enough to claim it. Susanoo stared at the blade, breath ragged, his hands trembling. Never before had he felt such weight, not of steel, but of destiny. This was not a weapon of chance. This was a symbol. This, he whispered, is no prize of victory. This is a key. The storm god sheathed the sword, tucking it against his side. Yet, even as he did, he felt its presence thrumming like a heartbeat. The blade whispered of order and balance, of powers beyond his wild storms. It was not his by conquest, it was entrusted to him. But what was he to do with it? Susanoo turned his eyes to the heavens, where Amaterasu's light had begun to pierce through the fading storm clouds. For a moment, warmth brushed his face, the same warmth he had once resented, once envied. Now it felt different. Perhaps, he thought, this sword was not meant for him alone. Perhaps it was meant to mend what had been broken. The villagers, who had once lived in fear of Orochi, began to emerge from hiding. At first, they came trembling, fearful that the serpent would rise again. But when they saw its lifeless form and Susanoo standing tall with his blade, their fear gave way to awe. They fell to their knees, voices rising in gratitude. Susanoo no Mikoto, savior of Izuma, slayer of the serpent, protector of the land. The storm god looked at them with an expression rarely seen upon his face, a trace of humility. For the first time, he was not the bringer of chaos, but its conqueror. For the first time, he was more than a rebel. He was a guardian. In the days that followed, Susanoo remained among the people of Izuma. He repaired what Orochi had destroyed, taught rituals to cleanse the land of venom, and calmed the floods that had plagued their fields. He, the exile, became their protector, but always his gaze returned to the sword. One night, beneath the stars, Susanoo sat by the serpent's carcass, now decaying into the earth. The sword rested across his knees, glowing faintly in the starlight. His mind drifted to Takamagahara, to his sister Amaterasu. Their feud had torn heaven apart. Their rivalry had cast shadows upon the world. And yet, this sword felt like a bridge, born from chaos, discovered through trial. It seemed destined not to divide, but to unite. Perhaps Susanoo murmured, "This is the gift I must bring her, not as an enemy, not as a rival, but as a brother." He resolved then to carry the blade to Amaterasu, to offer it as a token of reconciliation. The storm god would humble himself, and in doing so, perhaps the heavens might find balance again. The villagers, too, sensed the weight of his choice. When he told them of his intent, they wept, but blessed him. "Go, great Susanoo," they said. "The heavens need you. The world needs peace. Carry the sword as a bond between earth and sky." And so, with the dawn, Susanoo began his journey. The storm god, once cast from heaven, now walked the path of redemption, with Kusanagi no Tsurugi at his side. His steps were heavy but resolute. The mountains echoed with his passage. Rivers bowed before him, parting at his stride. Even the winds seemed hushed, as though awaiting what would come next. For this was no longer the story of exile. It was the story of destiny. The storm had claimed its weapon. The storm had claimed its purpose. And in the distance, high above, Amaterasu's radiance burned, waiting. Chapter 10. The Journey to Heaven. The turmoil within Takamagahara had reached its peak. After the violent clash and humiliation of Amaterasu at the hands of her brother Susanoo, the heavens were left scarred. The sacred rice fields were ruined, shrines shattered, and celestial maidens, terrified by the rampage of the storm god. The Sun Goddess, having been driven into hiding, had only recently returned to the world after the gods devised clever tricks to lure her from the cave. Now, though the light of the sun once again shone, the heavens themselves remained unstable. In the aftermath, the elder gods gathered to deliberate on how to restore balance. Amaterasu's brilliance was necessary for the order of heaven and earth. Yet, Susanoo's chaotic energy still threatened harmony. Though he had been exiled from the heavenly court, the rift he caused between divine siblings had not yet healed. The Council of Kami declared that a sacred journey must be undertaken, one that would test the resolve of the gods and reaffirm the rightful order of the cosmos. Amaterasu, carrying the weight of her responsibility as the bringer of light, prepared to ascend the celestial path once more. Her radiance illuminated the heavenly roads, and behind her followed attendants bearing banners, jewels, and offerings meant to sanctify the journey. This was not a return to seclusion, but a ceremonial reclaiming of her throne as ruler of the high plane of heaven. The other kami lined the path, chanting ancient hymns to purify the skies of Susanoo's lingering chaos. Far below, Susanoo, banished to the mortal realm, watched the heavens glow with renewed brilliance. His heart, though proud and wild, stirred with an unfamiliar heaviness. He had lost his place in the heavens, and with it, the bond with his sister. Yet the storm within him whispered that his tale was not finished, that his path would one day rise once more toward the divine. As Amaterasu reached the gates of the heavenly palace, a hush fell across Takamagahara. She raised the Yasakani no Magatama, the sacred jewel, as a symbol of her authority. Its glow mingled with her own, spreading light across the cosmos. The darkness that had threatened to engulf both heaven and earth was finally pierced. The journey was not simply a return to her domain, but a renewal of the cosmic order itself. Heaven, though scarred, began to mend. The kami rejoiced, their chants echoing like thunder across the skies, and the mortal world below basked in the warmth of the restored sun. Yet even in this triumph, shadows lingered. For though Amaterasu had reclaimed the heavens, Susanoo's storm still raged beyond its borders. The journey was only a step, not the conclusion, of the struggle between harmony and chaos. Chapter 11. The Final Confrontation. The high plane of heaven gleamed once more with the restored light of Amaterasu. Yet despite her triumphant return, whispers of unrest echoed across both heaven and earth. For far away, on the storm-lashed coasts where Susanoo had wandered in exile, the storm god's fury had not subsided. His heart, torn between guilt and pride, burned with the desire to prove his worth once more. Susanoo could not accept being cast aside. Why should I, who command the seas and storms, bow before the sun alone? He thundered. His voice shook the ocean, and towering waves struck the shores. His rebellion had scarred heaven before, and now it threatened to unravel the balance of creation itself. Amaterasu, from her palace, heard his cries carried on the wind. The kami warned her not to descend again into conflict, fearing that the storms might overwhelm even the light of the sun. But Amaterasu knew the truth. The balance of the cosmos could not be restored until she and her brother faced each other once more. Thus she prepared for the final confrontation. Arrayed in robes of pure light, she bore the sacred mirror, Yata no Kagami, upon her chest, reflecting the brilliance of the sun. Around her gathered the loyal kami, but this was a battle she knew must ultimately be faced alone. When she descended to the edge of the seas, Susanoo emerged from the roaring waters, his form towering with wild, untamed power. His hair whipped about like storm clouds, and lightning danced across his arms. For a moment, the world seemed divided. The blazing sun above, and the raging storm below. Amaterasu, he roared. You hid from the world because of me, and now you shine only because the gods lured you back. Are you truly the sovereign of heaven, or do you fear the storm's strength? Amaterasu's eyes blazed like fire. I am the light that nourishes heaven and earth. Without me, life falters. But without harmony, my light dims. You are my brother, Susanoo, yet your defiance threatens not only me, but all creation. I will not allow it. The clash erupted with terrifying force. Amaterasu unleashed beams of radiant fire, scorching the clouds and piercing the waters, while Susanoo summoned hurricanes and tidal waves to smother her light. The seas boiled under their power, and the skies tore open with lightning. The kami watched in awe and dread, fearing the world itself might shatter from the fury of the siblings. For hours, or perhaps eternities, the battle raged. Neither yielded. Each attack was met with an equal force, the sun blazing against the storm battering against the sun. Yet, as the struggle wore on, it became clear that this was no ordinary contest of strength. It was a clash of wills, a test to decide whether chaos or harmony would reign over the cosmos. And as the 11th chapter of their saga closed, the heavens themselves hung in suspense. Would the storm extinguish the sun, or would the sun bring calm to the storm? Chapter 12. The Balance Restored. The battle between Amaterasu and Susanoo had raged with such intensity that heaven and earth trembled as though caught in the throes of destruction. Light and storm clashed, each refusing to yield until even the kami feared the bonds of creation would unravel. Amaterasu's radiance scorched the skies, yet each blaze was met by Susanoo's raging tempests. Waves rose like mountains, clouds swallowed the horizon, and lightning slashed through the heavens. But in the chaos, something began to stir within Susanoo's heart, a memory of what he had once destroyed. The rice fields, the temples, the peace of heaven, and most painfully, the grief he had caused his sister. His storms faltered, just for a moment. And in that pause, Amaterasu spoke not with anger, but with unwavering clarity. "Susanoo, my brother," she called, her voice carrying across the tempest. "We are two halves of the same creation. My light warms the land, but it is your rains that nourish it. Alone, we are incomplete. Together, we sustain the world. Do you not see? The harmony of heaven cannot exist without both the sun and the storm." Her words pierced through the roar of the sea more deeply than any beam of light. Susanoo faltered, struck not by her power, but by her truth. The storms around him weakened, the waves sank back into the depths. For the first time, he saw himself not as a rival, but as a complement to his sister's brilliance. With a heavy heart, Susanoo lowered his head. "I have brought ruin through pride and rage. I sought to prove my strength, but only proved my weakness. Amaterasu, forgive me." The Sun Goddess, radiant yet serene, extended her hand. "I do not seek to conquer you, brother. I seek to walk beside you. Let the world know the storm may rage, but always under the guidance of the sun. In balance, we endure." In that moment, the heavens cleared, the sea stilled, and the winds softened into a gentle breeze. Amaterasu's light shone unchallenged, but now it danced across the waters, joined by the quiet strength of Susanoo's storms. The kami rejoiced, for creation had not only been saved, but had been renewed. The siblings, once torn by conflict, now stood united. Amaterasu would reign as the sovereign of heaven, her light guiding the world, while Susanoo, tempered by humility, would take his place as guardian of the seas, his storms serving life rather than destroying it. Thus was balance restored, sun and storm, light and shadow, two forces forever entwined. From their reconciliation, the cosmos learned a truth that endures across ages, that harmony is not the absence of struggle, but the unity born from it. And so ended the tale of Amaterasu and Susanoo, a story of rivalry, wrath, and at last, reconciliation, a myth that continues to remind mortals and gods alike that even the fiercest battles can give birth to balance and peace.